So we've been talking about scaling e-commerce businesses, and it's tough, isn't it?
It's really hard. It's really hard. I feel for the founders.
It's like you need to get this perfect recipe right, get the right ingredients at the right time, in the right order.
Yep.
Otherwise,
well, it's having the right customer in the right place at the right time, the right stock. There's so many different variables to consider when you're thinking about e-commerce as well, and I think it's a difficult sector to be in. Don't you think? I mean, if you think about our tech clients and SaaS clients, it's a totally different sort of ball game when it comes to e-commerce.
Yeah, e-commerce definitely has some nuances. It's definitely got harder over the last few years. If you think about like kind of Google, Facebook, etc., they've sucked so much value out of the D2C market, and they're firmly embedded in that kind of value chain that they're the ones making loads of money out of e-commerce. So now I think in the 2020s, as it were, and we're heading towards 2030, it's tougher than it's ever been to make money in e-commerce. You go back maybe 15 years and you could get away with some horrible habits if you're running an e-commerce business and still probably be profitable. But these days you have to get most things right most of the time. Otherwise, you really don't make much margin, and certainly you can run out of cash just like that.
That's a really good point, because I think as well, if you think about attribution as well, so you're thinking about these businesses, people trying to understand what is working, what's not working, and this iOS update that came in as well, where you can't actually identify what marketing spend is working, what's not. I think it's made it really tricky for business owners as well to actually know where to pump that money in.
Absolutely. 10, 15 years ago in big corporates, I used to be a CFO in a corporate, and trying to attribute marketing spend to channels and to activities and to clients was incredibly difficult. Even with all the resources of a massive business, it was still a bit of a guessing game in terms of attribution as to what's working, what's not working, particularly when you add like brand ads in. It's very easy to go Meta, this ad, this product. Is it working? A/B test it. That's relatively tried and tested. But when you start adding in other channels and you start adding in some brand spend, the pot gets a bit murky there, and you have to start looking at the fundamentals, which is how much am I spending? Am I actually making money? Can I spend more to make more? And you have to go back to kind of first principles on it. But I also like e-commerce businesses because it is quite a numbers game, and that really appeals to
Algebra.
my internal accountant, if you like. So once you can see the numbers clearly, you can see what's working or not working. And I think, I like to look at it, as I said to you, like the recipe for e-commerce. What does good look like? And, I always talk about Paul's recipe of e-commerce businesses, what margins you're trying to aim for, how to think about marketing spend, how you need to see all the various metrics. It's very difficult to make profit on the first sale of an e-commerce business. You're really lucky if that first purchase makes any substantial money. So you're kind of betting the house on, are they going to come back? Yeah, are they going to come back?
Yeah.
And if they're going to come back, when? Precisely. And how much are they going to spend?
Yeah.
And after they come back, will they come back again? Yeah. So it's that kind of game of you're probably going to have to squeeze the accelerator quite hard in an e-commerce business to get new clients and introduce your brand and your product to them. And then, a bit like a car, once you've got up to speed, you kind of coast and you're a bit more fuel efficient, as it were, and the profits start to come in and you get those repeat purchases, and you find that after a while, if people love your brand or your product, they come back. And the e-commerce businesses that really struggle are the ones that don't have great repeat purchases. They might have a great product, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to something you buy every week or every month or every even every year. So that's quite a difficult environment, I think, to be an e-commerce business. So the kind of product dynamic, or the product that you're selling, really affects the financials of the business, as it were. If you're selling toothpaste online, right, you're going to consume it, use it, and repurchase it.
Yeah.
So you would hope that, by and large, you would have a repeat purchase quite often.
Every month or so, whatever.
Yeah. And you could get people to stock up, and you could have a sort of quasi-subscription business with your e-commerce business if you want. But if you're selling a one-off purchase, a TV, for example, or whatever, you don't buy those every day. You might buy them occasionally in there.
So that cost of acquiring that customer then becomes more important, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
and the value they're going to get off the back of it.
You might be selling a big ticket item, but if you're only selling it relatively infrequently, your business model is going to be really tough unless obviously the cost of getting the customer and providing that product is relatively small compared to what the customer's kind of prepared to pay. So that product dynamic, if you like, is like a little story that's inside every e-commerce business, and you've got to kind of figure out how that product operates financially, as well as like what does it do? Is it toothpaste? Is it a towel? Is it an item of clothing?
You're going to have some products that bring the customer to your store, right? So you're going to have your, what would you call them?
Hero products.
Hero products, that's it, or a flagship product. So you've got a hero product that's going to bring that customer to your website, to your store, and so on. So, what are they going to buy when they come and buy that item? What are they going to do with it? I think the one thing that I find quite hard as well, watching when you're speaking to founders or talking to founders that maybe are younger in the game or earlier on in their journey, we've not done it before, maybe 6-figure businesses trying to get to the 7. They've not done this before. They don't know what good looks like. They're coming to us for that sort of, what do I do now conversation. They don't know what they don't know. Great. This is where we can step in and help them. So, I've got scenarios where we've got sort of a marketing person will come and say to a client, all right, you know what, I've done a great job at your marketing, but you know what, your bucket's leaking on your returning customers. That's the problem. It's not me, it's your returning customers that's the problem. Right, do you know what, I'm going to go and validate that that's right, because I'm not going to trust that is necessarily the right thing that's happening, So we can go and look at that information. And I've found a few times now that actually that isn't the problem. Marketing is not bringing in the volume of customers that they say they're bringing in. They're bringing in the revenue, but the average order value is actually higher. So the order number is down. So, that's a completely different conversation. So actually, no marketing, you haven't done what you said you were doing.
Yeah,
we need to have a conversation.
Agencies want to sell ads, right?
Exactly.
So they want you to spend. So the whole marketing and agency side is really geared up to spending your money and convincing you that, yes, you can live off a 2x ROAS.
Yeah. You can't.
You won't make any money off a 2x ROAS. I haven't seen any e-commerce business that will consistently make money off a 2x ROAS. So
it's like gross margin, right? What's the minimum you'd expect?
Absolutely. Can you live on a 45% gross margin? I'd argue not healthily. Absolutely. I always say to e-commerce businesses, 60% gross margins. A target to aim for. Not everybody can quite get there, but 60% is gold standard. It's not platinum standard. There are businesses doing better than that, but it's certainly gold standard.
And it's specific, isn't it? Depending on exactly what you're selling, because some things are going to have a better margin than others, by default, by nature. So
yeah, and ultimately, when you're kind of doing that marketing, you're getting a basket of spend, right? And this is where AOV comes in, which is if you're spending £20 to get a customer and they're only buying £30 worth of stuff. Almost impossible to make any money on that, right? The basket size has to be big enough that you can recoup almost that fixed cost of acquiring a customer, because Google and Meta do not want to give you a customer for much less than like 20, 30 quid most of the time. In fact, often it can be substantially more than that. So, they need to be spending multiples of what you're spending to get the customer with you, given that you've got a cost of a product, you've got the cost of shipping, everything. In order to make that financial equation work, you need a healthy AOV, certainly relative to the spend. But if you're not getting a kind of £60, £70 plus AOV, you're going to really struggle to scale that first customer acquisition profitably. And ideally, in the US, it needs to be over $100 AOV. That's what good looks like.
Yeah.
So when I think about the fuel that you need to scale an e-commerce business, right? It comes down to you need some cash, you need to buy some stock to sell some stock.
Sounds simple.
It does sound simple.
It's not.
But you've either got too much stock or not enough stock. Never just the right amount, right? And it's so hard in a small e-commerce business to have the kind of data to predict how much you need and when. And obviously there's loads of seasonality with certain products and various other things, Christmas, you've got Black Friday and all this other stuff. So there's quite a lot of noise in there. And if you're not attuned to kind of forecasting, you can definitely find yourself at points in the year where you're in that kind of feast or famine kind of stock.
And it's a really dangerous area for business, right? If you overstock in a certain area, in a certain product or type, it could shut you down. So thinking ahead, and actually that demand planning piece is so important, but it's actually very difficult to do. And if you don't have, and the thing is as well, we work with businesses that are usually quite small, so they've not got off the ground yet. They haven't got the staff or the people in-house to help with that demand planning. So they're trying to do it blind. They're trying to do what they think is going to work. So it's a very difficult place for businesses to be in.
Yeah, and often smaller e-commerce businesses, even 6-figure, 7-figure businesses, don't have a lot of cash
Yeah, to tie up in stock in the first place, right?
In stock in the first place. And if you don't make profits, you're not going to add to that cash pile to be able to invest in stock, to be able to scale. So the thing that I see more often than not in e-commerce businesses is they've got stock, but they've got no cash. If they've got cash, they've probably got no stock, and vice versa, and therefore trading is impacted in there, and they kind of flip-flop between those sort of two extremes. Eventually, when you get the hang of it, you kind of settle down, and you've mostly got the right stock at most of the right time throughout the year.
It's back to that recipe point you made earlier, right? So if you've got the recipe right, you know what you're doing, but if you don't have the recipe, you're messing around with it all really and trying to find what good looks like for you, but it might not be the right decision.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you look at some really big UK brands like Gymshark, when Ben Francis founded Gymshark, he was asked what was the thing that allowed you to scale Gymshark so quickly and so big. Do you know what he said?
What did he say?
He said it was the way I bought stock.
Yeah.
What he actually meant under the covers of that was that he paid for the stock to his suppliers after he'd already collected the money and sold it to a customer.
Yeah.
So in our finance world, we'd call that a negative working capital cycle. That's a bit of a big word, but basically sell it before you've bought it.
Yeah.
Amazing, right?
Yeah.
You're literally getting cash before
That's
you need to
taken just
pay.
in time for another level, right?
Yeah, and he credited that, which was a bit of a, not a mistake, but a bit of an accidental thing. He just got some really good terms with his initial suppliers as basically giving him the fuel to be able to scale the business. Without that, they'd have never had the cash. They'd have needed to seek investment, and he wouldn't have been a majority shareholder for most of that scaling journey. They'd have raised a lot of capital, and he'd have been diluted. So we're quite used to seeing that journey in our sort of, say, tech and software businesses where it's quite capital intense. And e-commerce can be as well if you allow it to be. You know, and a lot of businesses just sort of buy stock, and you know, it's like pay them a deposit up front, pay them when it's ready, pay half when it's on the boat, you know, the other 25% when it's landed or something. You're like, you've paid for it, and then you take 90 days to sell it. You're like, wow, that's a lot of money you've got to tie up in your supply chain to be able to fund, unless you're super profitable or you've come to the game with a lot of capital.
You've got the negotiation point as well then, because obviously negotiating the costs of anything that relates to your margin, right? So in terms of shipping, in terms of costings, any kind of costings you have in your P&L, the negotiation skills that are required to kind of to bring those prices down are not necessarily natural to a founder.
Yeah, I'd sort of say yes, negotiating with supply chain is maybe not where people have a skill set, but it's also something that you think, I'll do that later. So you put it off. You don't really do it, and you only do it when you're literally out of money.
Have to.
You know, you hit the wall and you go, what you really should be doing is having a strategic conversation as you scale. You know, if you've proven that you can sell stuff as a 6-figure business,
you've got more weighting,
you need to renegotiate to be a 7-figure business, right? You need not just better terms in terms of, you know, you're buying more, so you should probably buy a little bit cheaper, but you need better terms. And a lot of people just focus on the price, don't focus on the payment mechanics. And that's really important in e-commerce businesses, to have the right payment mechanics with your supplier to make sure that that working capital cycle is either as short as possible, or if you're super lucky, negative. And that's really nice. And you know, I'm sure you see with some of your e-com businesses that even if they get all that right, what's the one thing they do in shipping? Yeah,
that's the thing. You know, they give shipping away for free.
Well, to the customer. But in their supplier, because they're not planning stock, they tend to ship it all by air, right? And you know, as we know, sticking stuff on planes, lastminute.com, getting it into your warehouse to be able to sell it is an expensive business, which just chews your margin. So a sign of a good e-commerce business, or well-planned e-commerce business, is a very healthy sea to air ratio kind of thing. And I always say the recipe on that is like, you're probably 80-20, you know, 80% sea, 20% air. You know, if you're consistently like 50-50, you really are, you know, you need to go back and look at your planning, if you like, on that. You know, it's a really good giveaway for like, you know, how good are you at stock forecasting? Well, don't look at stock outs, just look at how you're shipping it. You know, that'll give you a really good indication about how you're, how well you're doing on.
I mean, it basically shows that anything you want to do, is planning and preparing and forecasting and thinking ahead. If you're not thinking ahead, you can't just make decisions now without thinking of the impact of that later on, right? You just can't work like that. You can't run a business like that.
I'll pick up on that kind of planning point, which is, if if you're not planning forward in an e-commerce business, what are my sales going to be?
Yeah.
What's my marketing investment? What stock do I need to buy? And you're not getting that kind of financial plan in place, how do you know you've got enough money to play the game?
Yeah.
You probably don't.
Yeah.
So you might be able to buy the stock, but if you can't afford to pay your marketing bill to Meta,
Yeah.
you're not going to go very far. You're going to have a lot of stock that you can't sell. So you really need to ensure you have enough capital in the business to do that. And of course, starting a business is really, really hard.
Yeah.
As soon as you make a bit of money, natural thing is I want to pay myself a bit more. But if the business can't live, you're shooting yourself in the foot with that. So that's why a lot of founders, it's credit cards to start with, right? That 30-day Amex kind of
see that all the time.
spend. You see a lot of credit cards being used for marketing spend, which is great if you know what you're doing. But it's kind of that release valve of I've run out of money, so I'm going to put it on kind of credit card. And then you see quite a lot of e-commerce businesses at various levels.
Got the revenue-based financing as well, the loop that you get stuck into.
The doom loop of revenue-based financing, 100%. Which is sucking you into a mechanic that you can't get off.
You can't get off it. You can't get off that wheel.
Not very easily. We've helped several e-com businesses to put in more fixed rate, cheaper financing in order to wean off that kind of revenue-based financing and be more stable, and then pay that debt down slowly and ultimately become debt-free and start building their kind of capital reserves and stuff. And I think as you graduate from that 6 to 7 to 8 figure business, all these kind of lessons come out, don't they? And you can't afford to be paying stuff on credit card if you want to be an 8-figure business, and that's your business.
And that's your go-to finance solution.
Absolutely doesn't work. That's the 6-figure play. But as soon as you get into 7 figures, that maxes out. Credit cards can only go so far in limit. Even if you've got a really good credit score, you might get a couple of $100,000 if you've got a really good credit score on there. But then you start blowing out into overdrafts and revenue-based financing or loans or whatever to fund that growth.
Yeah.
But the best e-commerce businesses I've ever seen, the ones with the right recipe, don't need all that.
Yeah.
They make the right amount of margin up front with the customer.
It's thought through.
It's thought through, or it's accidentally thought through because they've managed to get a product or the recipe has been relatively right early on, and they haven't had to tweak it too much. So they have a kind of like a natural good recipe. So they've got a product that's kind of like relatively high priced, for example. Good
margins naturally.
Good margins naturally. Is in demand. The marketing costs aren't. It's an underserved area, so they're not having to compete with other brands to spend loads to get attention in there. So they might have a little niche on that, but that's like 1 in 10, I find, businesses do that. The rest, work out that actually they need quite a lot of salt and pepper in the recipe, and sometimes some fundamental ingredients need to come in or out of the recipe to make it taste right to kind of scale. And that's why so many e-commerce businesses either stay small, an Amazon seller, for example, or eBay, or a little bit of D2C, but struggle to get that kind of takeoff, don't they? Of how they grow up into 7 and 8 figure brands.
Do you find with founders as well? So when I speak to founders, my first conversation I'll have with them is, okay, what's your actual goal? What are you trying to do here? Where are you trying to get to? Some will say, I want to exit 3-5 years. I'm done. I'm in here. I'm in it for the money. I want to get what I want, and I want to move on and do it again. Serial entrepreneurs, so to speak. You've got some that just want to do it, want to see that they can do it. Some have got a lifestyle, a business they want to carry on as they are. They're happy for it to tick along. They don't particularly want to grow. How do you navigate the conversations with those different kind of businesses? Because I find them quite interesting. I quite enjoy working with different variety of them. What are your thoughts on that?
Not everybody wants to or can get to a 9-figure brand, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important to understand what the founder's goals are. Or the founding team's goals are in that sense. Most people are really passionate about the product or the brand they've created, I find.
It's their baby as well sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would be rightly proud if you had a business like that and people were buying your product and loving it on kind of social media, if you like. But I always think you need to, whatever your goals are, you need to align your financial plans to the goals. My mum always used to say, cut your cloth.
Like that.
If you're aiming to have a lifestyle brand, work out what, for you as a founder, work out what that lifestyle looks like. Is that like time out of the business? Is that money to do what you want? What does that mean to you? Because even time out of a business means you've got to pay somebody else to run it whilst you're not there.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to have enough profit and margin to allow you to have a team who can do it. Otherwise, you guess what? You're not going to be out having much time out of the business because you'll be sucked into kind of day to day. So I think it is a conversation with a founder, and that's really important for us when we're, you know, helping them with their finances to understand what their goals are. You know, if it's scale it to
because otherwise
the moon,
you're pushing water uphill, right? Because, you know, I've had experience where I've tried to push a business to grow, and it's like, why don't you want to grow? Why don't you want to grow? And after a while, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm pushing them to do something they don't want to do. So it's it's understanding what the actual goal is there before you get going.
Yeah, growth for growth's sake is not always the right answer.
And if the margins aren't right, as we know, there's no point growing because you're just going to make your losses bigger.
I've had many an e-commerce founder crying on my shoulder with an 8-figure business saying they're unhappy. The business is harder to run, less successful than when they were smaller.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not enjoying it. And I think, crikey, you know, you've done amazingly well, right? You've navigated startup 6 figures, 7 figures, and 8 figures, but you know, the business isn't in the right place. They're doing too much. They're suffering from kind of burnout or fatigue. The numbers aren't great, so the reward's not there. You're not getting that kind of, you're making loads of money, dopamine hit, or it's easy to operate. You're just like, no, it's tough. We don't make much money. Problems everywhere. Yeah. And it's like, okay, we're not. But that business has not scaled or has not really aligned to what the founder's goals wanted to be. And sometimes you need a bit of a reset on those sort of things, don't you?